Hello, Changemaker,
Welcome to the Innovation Room.
a place for business leaders,
Change agents and change champions.
anyone who wants to know where digital transformation is taking us,
A place that sparks ideas.
and explores what's really possible with software and technology.
Ready?
Let's see what's happening.
How you approach innovation in your business depends on so many factors, from the industry you're in, for example, how regulated it is, to the size of your organization, startup versus scale up, or to the cultural aspect of your organization, traditional top to bottom or modern and fluid. Regardless of where your organization sits, there are so much to learn from others, what works for them and what doesn't, and how they do things differently to you. Brant Cooper is the New York Times best-selling author of The Lean Entrepreneur and CEO of Moves the Needle. With over 2 decades of expertise helping companies bring innovative products to market, he blends agile design thinking and lean methodologies to ignite entrepreneurial action within large organizations. I am Somayeh, CEO of Geeks. Join me in the Innovation Room to hear from Brant Cooper on what mid-market companies can learn from large corporates when it comes to innovation. Hi, Brant. Thank you very much for joining me in the Innovation Room. Do you want to start with a bit of an introduction about yourself and your passions and what you do, and then we take it from there?
Yes, thanks, Maya. I'm happy to be here. So I lead a company called Moves the Needle that for the last 9 or 10 years has been trying to bring an innovation mindset into very large organizations, often in their innovation groups, but we tend to go wherever there's uncertainty because that's what the innovation mindset solves for. So we've done uh, new products, commercialization, back office functions. We've really done a variety of places in a very large variety of companies, trying to see who can lead change. And I think this is, more important now than ever in the digital age. Everybody pretends they want digital products. What they really want is a digital mindset, and it's a different way of working. Prior to that, I was in the startup scene, so I got my start in the Silicon Valley startup scene back during the dot-com boom and bust. Aging myself there, but worked in a variety of startups in a variety of roles, and I really think that was what helped me define what this innovation mindset, this entrepreneurial mindset, needed to be, and that corporations do need it, and they need it throughout their business, and they have not realized it yet, most of them. It's a lot of hard work, but we do get some wins, and the wins are extraordinary because you see the light bulbs go off and it changes the way people work. Maybe we could have saved everybody from the big quit, or maybe we can get people back from the big quit by just empowering them to go and be innovation minded.
When we talked last time, it was very interesting to learn about your experience with the innovation work you have been helping the big corporates, and what the mid market and the change makers of the mid market, who are our audience in the innovation room, they could learn from the successes and the failures and the lessons. I want to throw you the question that is our standard question we do in the innovation room. And that is, who would you bring, dead or alive, fiction or real, into the innovation room with you?
Yeah, so easy choice for me would be to bring Clayton Christensen. I think for people that lived during that era, 80s, 90s, his books were just, they were just the Bible of innovation. And so Innovator's Dilemma in particular. And what's interesting about that is that I think the era of Kristen Clayton's Innovation Dilemma is over. And so that's what I would ask him. And I think it would be a very,
What he would do.
yeah, exactly. What would be that conversation would like? I think that described an era where technology was innovating so quickly, based upon the doubling the speed of the microchip and all the rest. And the example that I always used when touting Mr. Christensen was his hard drive examples, and they were halving in size every year. And, the big company said, like, well, that's great, but I don't need those smaller sizes. And yet, the industry was lagging a couple, like the rest of the industry was lagging a couple years behind, but yeah, eventually they needed all those smaller drives, and so that would really uh, cause wreak havoc on those older companies that knew the new technology was coming but
Yeah.
didn't want to have anything to do with it. I think
Yeah.
that their era is over.
Why would you say what would you say that what the era that we are entering looks like from your point of view?
So the era that we're entering now, the all of the equipment, which is really what costs all the money, has the same form factor. And we're not seeing the doubling of the speeds of computers themselves or of hard drives now that we've gotten to this latest iteration. And so, and even the budgets of how to get upgrades and all of those things have been built into the companies. Whereas before, like in the 90s, the company's IT budget was blown up every single year. Like the computers slowed down every year, and new systems coming out that had never been done before were coming out every year. And it just doesn't happen that way anymore. And so companies are now focused on using the technology to properly digitize their own companies. It's called digital transformation. And they're turning their products digital, but they're also turning all of their back office functions digital. And they're all trying to become digital companies. We saw during the pandemic that the companies that were the most successful in surviving all of those years of economic issues that were followed by other economic issues, supply chain attacks and ransomware attacks, and all of these things that just I call endless disruption. Companies have adapted or had to adapt. The successful companies have. And so digital transformation really isn't around the technology. The difficult part is the people and the processes and the systems that are still built upon the industrial age. And so there may be those that still suffer from the classic innovator's dilemma. Should I invest in new stuff? But it's sort of not a question now. Everybody's investing in new stuff.
Yeah.
And really, it's the mindset part of it that is very difficult to change. And there's not a lot of corporate CEOs. They talk the game, but there's not a lot of corporate CEOs that understand how to do the people change of it. And they've been trying these top-down change methods as if they would do that for hardware. And they're hiring the big consulting firms that all suffer from the same problems that they're trying to give to their clients. And they don't really realize that this is a grassroots level. It's built from the ground up because we're talking about fundamental behavior change. And like I alluded to at the beginning, in the end, 95% of the people love that behavior change. They get to exercise their creativity and their aspiration, and they get to solve problems, and they feel like they're committed to real things, and they get to have an impact on the company and maybe an impact on the world. And that inspires them, and it means that they want to stay. And so you can solve both these problems, but getting companies to realize that, and it's hard work.
I think also there are multi-facet other challenges that adds to the complexity, like the generational changes
Yep.
and the fact that we are having the Gen Z entering the workforce and the millennials entering the executive levels, and the pace at which the technology is changing, and how do you deal with the whole complexity. I was talking to in one of the previous episodes, I was talking to a behavioral economist, and I thought I'm so cool saying that I think everybody has to have Gen Z and millennial on their boards, and he said no, they have to have kids on their boards, because kids are born in this new world, and they think differently, and they behave differently. So it's big challenges when we think most of the executive boards of large or small companies, it doesn't, like, it's the theme is the same. They are from a different generation.
One of the amazing things about working in this way, the innovation mindset, is having to admit that you don't know. And so just the admission of I don't know turns on our own childlike creative. It's still in us. We just got it driven out of us. And so you can show kids can show us how to do that in play, but it really isn't. My experience is you can get adults of any age, and you inspire them to go and be creative and exercise their intelligence, but also use their experience,
Mm,
that's going to work. And we
mm.
definitely need younger people on the boards. And one of the better examples of transformation, ING, the bank in Europe, had a very young board.
How, from your experience then in larger organizations, how much of it is solvable, and what would be your views on how to go about solve? Because I can, like, it's an interesting topic to just sit around outside the arena and talk about, oh, they have to change, but how can they change, how they can break through this barrier?
Yeah, I think it's one of those crazy things where you have to use the methods to get the methods in. So, in other words, I call it like acting like a startup. And so,
Mm.
you're an innovation team inside of a large organization, you're acting like a startup. And what you have to do is go get empathy for your customers. And that's like crazy. You're like, oh, going and get empathy for my bosses that have my budget. And yep, understand what their background is, understand whether they understand the change, understand, what are the things that are keeping them up at night. And so it's really turning it around. And it's less of thinking, what are the products that I'm going to innovate outside? Because I really don't think innovation teams are truly going to innovate bigly. It's just, they're competing against thousands of startups, and they've got a team of two or three. So it's just not going to happen. And so that's one of
So
the
how do
myths.
they how do they work that you think is not working? Like, what is their setup, and how they are trying to innovate, or what is it that they're trying to innovate?
I love Alex Osterwalder, but if you look at his canvas and you try to go like, oh, well, here's a box that might change, and you run a bunch of experiments to see if there's a business model change or if there's something like that that's going to change. I think that's all, frankly, I think it's all BS.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the problem is that it's just not how big innovation happens. Big innovation doesn't happen by putting a bunch of people in a room. It just never has happened that way. And so I'm not sure I understand the mindset of why anybody thought that was going to work. And they're not going to invent anything. The R&D is going to invent something.
Mm.
So if you want, you can take what R&D is doing, and then you go do market exploration and see if there's a way for R&D to take that stuff to market. But usually it's not, because R&D is kind of doing stuff back in the garage, and maybe there's something there. But again, this isn't Steve Jobs in a garage inventing a computer for the first time. There was, I don't know, there was a dozen people doing it, I guess, probably more around the world, but not at the right place and not at the right time and not locked inside of a corporate. So, I mean, I guess I think that even invention is mostly inventing stuff that's not going to be used, which is fine, because that's, again, it's a numbers game.
Mm-hmm.
How many things are you inventing, and how many experiments are being run, and what is the disparity of the people running the experiments? It's a startup ecosystem. And so if you look at any one need that's trying to be addressed with newer technology in the startup world, you have thousands of startups that are trying this out. And even if I'm a big company, am I going to spin up a couple teams and think that I'm going to compete with that? Or should I sit back and understand what it is that they're all doing, and look at the ones that are looking like the winners, or even the middle ones, and looking at what are their problems? Maybe there's somewhere I can help. Then
Yeah.
that seems way more rational to me. And of course, I think that's what CEOs think, and that's why the innovation teams don't get very much budget.
Mm.
In the end, what I think is, and what I've written about recently, is that the innovation labs, the innovation teams, need to become centers of excellence where they can support the mindset, they can support the design thinking, the digital,
How would that, what does that even, let's take our industry, like the whole technology industry is full of buzzwords, and we love to create buzzwords. But let's talk about what's the definition of innovation lab in the bigger organizations. Like, what do they call when they refer to something as this is innovation lab? What do they mean by that? And then what do you mean by center of excellence? And how do you define that center of excellence? And how is it different? And why do you think it should be called something else? Is there...
Yeah, it's meaningful. Yep. So the innovation lab has been assigned coming up with what they call the Horizon 2s or Horizon 3s. And I've written about also why that model is completely broken and people should throw it out, but it's not going to be. The way they use it is Horizon 2 is they're supposed to invent incremental innovation, and Horizon 3 is breakthrough innovation. There is no evidence that large companies could or should do breakthrough innovation. There just isn't any evidence for it. And I don't even think they have the need to do it. People are still talking about what they talk about Netflix and Kodak. And anybody went and read the stories about what happened there, it's just there's nothing that Blockbuster should have done. They didn't care, I don't think. It's just like how many streaming services have come up since Netflix started? Blockbuster, even here today in 2023, could start a streaming services if they wanted to and probably be somewhat successful. So it's just not innovator's dilemma. And the same thing goes with Kodak. Kodak had cameras. They chose a business model that didn't work. That's not like they didn't do it. They didn't try. They just tried and they failed. It's not innovator's dilemma. So anyway, there's no evidence that I think even big companies need to do that. The exception may be companies that are still technology companies who have to invent new technology. But that's not in the innovation lab. That's in the R&D lab. And so they should be inventing their hearts out. And then, yes, maybe an innovation lab can help them test the market for those inventions. That's all fine. But what percentage of companies are in that situation? A tiny percent. And companies like in the healthcare that are inventing new drugs, they've already got that down. They know how to do all of that. So they don't need, hey, I'm your new innovation team. I can help you. They're also not going to do the incremental innovations. They can, but all of that stuff is already owned by the core business. The core business just doesn't know it. The core business is out talking to customers. The core business has customer support people, sales people, account people, product managers, designers, who are all gathering the information that if they were given the freedom to, they could go like, well, here is a new product that we could do out of this existing product. And I bet you there's a market for it based upon the evidence that I'm getting on a daily basis. So you don't need a new team spinning up to figure that stuff out. It already exists where it should exist in the core business. And if now the core business wants to spin out a separate startup to go take it on, that's fine. That's just a decision. If they want an innovation team to help do that sort of testing, that's fine. That's a resource issue. So the companies have the ability to make those decisions. And, sort of the classic innovator's dilemma said that those core business people don't have the ability to make the decisions, that they can only do execution or they can only do explore and not both. And it's just all of the digital transformation proves that is untrue. And my fundamental question, the last I'll say on the innovation labs is, if the innovation labs weren't the ones that were chosen to lead digital transformation, what was wrong with them? They're the ones that should have been out front doing it if that's what their expertise was. So I still think that they can become what I call the center of excellence. And it is teaching, coaching, proselytizing, innovation mindset or entrepreneurial spirit. And so that is talking to customers for real, brainstorming assumptions about whether this idea is going to be successful or not, using the evidence that you're gathering to make decisions, work in an agile fashion. So you're in your own sprints. So those things, the core business needs to adapt because those are the tools to overcome uncertainty. And if the core business is willing to admit, yes, we've got uncertainty. We're not sure how we're going to hit our numbers this year.
And why do you think that's the problem? Because I'm like probably asking a leading question here because we touched on it last time we talked. And how much you see that in the big corporate more than you would see it in the mid market or SMEs. The top down kind of military style um,
Yeah,
leadership
right.
that doesn't fit anymore. The uncertainty of the world and the way the way the world is changing, that kind of leadership doesn't work anymore. How much of what I'm saying you're seeing in the
Yeah,
space you're working in?
I see it in the mid market. I see it in the large enterprises too. A couple companies that we're working for in the mid markets, it's that way. They're a little bit they're easier to change because they have less of the hierarchy,
Hmm.
and the C suite seems to be more involved in the market. Whereas I think in the very large corporates, the C suite is just they're just trying to dole out all of their money to each other, so they're not paying attention. But the idea is that if you're building a car, if you're Henry Ford and you're building a car, a Model T, you can have it in any color as long as it was black. So he optimized his whole manufacturing, his whole back office functions, optimized for building one vehicle. It was beautifully efficient. But the moment somebody wanted a different color and the moment somebody wanted a different clutch, the moment someone wanted to change something, he would just say no until he got competition, and the competition can offer all of those things. Ford eventually had to change, but it took them a long while to change because their efficiency was so much better than all these other companies. They could produce a car that was less expensive, which was really their primarily driver, is going after the middle class who couldn't afford cars anymore. And so that was great in the 30s, 40s, 50s, up into the 60s. But now once you've got all of these options and all of these colors and models, and so now we're looking at today's day. You go look at a picture of a Tesla factory. There's nobody working in there. It's all robots that can instantly change a lot of these features and the functions and the colors and all of these type of things, because they're still going for the efficiency of building those cars, but it has to include all of the changes and the options. And so the point is really that those changes at Tesla are being driven by the consumer.
Do you think that changed because I think it's a very important point. Was there no desire in the customer market of 30s to have personalized items, or was it not just they didn't have it because it wasn't affordable, and now that technology has improved, that has become the expectation of the customers has gone so high that everybody expect personalized? Is that the shift in the customer market that you're
Right. So
seeing that?
there's a market shift. People realize they now can get it the way they want it. So they probably, one of the first questions was probably, hey, Henry, can I have mine in green? And he said, you can have it in any color as long as it's black. And so, yes, he essentially is saying, this is how I make a car that you can afford.
Mm,
And this is how I can spit out so many. So this is my competitive advantage as well as this. So, and there's only a few players in the market. You have to take what we're giving you. And so what the evolution has been over the last 50, 60, 70 years is, in order to compete, customer whims, customer needs, customer desires. There's so many choices. It's not even just choices between products, like between models or colors. It's, well, no, I'm going to go buy a refrigerator instead, right? I mean, so people
mm,
have money, but it's a limited set of funds, and then they're going to move those funds for whatever benefits them in their day. And there's so much information out there that it's even just a mindset thing, like, who can I get to pay attention to me? But so
mm,
the point is that the information is coming in from the edge of the company. Henry Ford knew everything because he designed it, and it's one thing he's building. But if you look at the digitization of the world, and you look at how closely interconnected we are, and you look at, that type of advertisement that was one way, it was a megaphone on top of the mountain. This
mm,
is who we are, and this is what we're selling. Buy it or don't. And now you've got social media telling which companies do this and which companies do that, and which ones are having problems, and which one, didn't offer me a refund. And so there's so much information on the quality of the company and their services. The customer is very much smarter now, and they're going to make choices based upon that. So just
mm,
without even getting into the disruptions, the whims of the customer, the agility of the customer to change from one brand to another, is like never before. And so that information comes from the edge of the company. It never even gets into the center of the company, probably. So the whole management style has to be distribute that decision making as close to the customer as possible. And if the customer service person can go, yes, you can have it in green, it's going to take you an extra month. And the customer goes like, that's awesome. That's fine. I'll take it. Right. But that's a decision that's made right there. It doesn't flow up through 20 layers of management. And
And
so
that's why that kind of leadership doesn't work anymore, because you can't,
exactly,
like, as at the top, you're not going to be able to know what the customer wants because
that's exactly right.
it's that top to bottom doesn't work anymore.
It's exactly right. And it's why we have design thinking. It's why we have rapid experimentation. It's why we have agile workforces where the company is flatter. It's not that that information doesn't flow back in. It's just slower, and it's not where the decisions need to be made unless there's a company priority that needs to be changed, and then that flows back down.
Mm.
But the rest of the world that's happening comes in through the edge as well. You know, the pandemic comes in from the edge. Supply chain issues come. You know, who's the first one that recognizes the supply chain issues are the people that are working in your, you know, taking in your inventory and saying that we can't buy anything. And so that's happening at the bottom, and it has to filter up. But it's decision making at the bottom layers that is actually makes a company more agile. And so that's completely flipping the way companies are organized.
What would that make the role of the leaders and C-suite then, when you want to have that much interactions and that much fluidity of innovation and ideas and listening to customers happening at the same time? What is the role of the C-suite? Like what they should do?
They should be way more strategic in aligning the work to the strategy and allocating resources based upon change. So they don't operate with change very well because they're looking around, and that's not where their changes are coming in from. But if the changes are coming in from the bottom, and you're suddenly like, wow, we've got Chinese factories that are closing. It's December 2020. We've got factories closing. I wonder what's going on there. We should look into that. We hear from our customers that they're not able to produce their clothing anymore in China because the factories are closing down. And so we're starting to lose money, and those are our customers. So this is an example in my latest book, Gerber Tech. So March 2020 is when everything, you know, sort of like we froze everything, what's going on. But by March 2020, Gerber Technologies in New York or Connecticut had started building a platform for their customers to be able to download new patterns in order to make PPE and masks and sell them domestically or internationally. So that was extraordinary change, right? So they caught wind of what was going on in China in 2019. And by 2020, had ways for their customers to maintain some revenue producing PPE. So that was insane, I thought, just extraordinary change. And so that's a great example of what leaders need to be able to do. You need to be able to take in this new information and go, okay, listen, if we do this, we're going to be able to maintain some of our revenues. And we don't know what's going to happen. We don't do, 3 months market research. We don't sit there and make business cases out of it and all this kind of stuff. We go, this is the right thing to do. And if we can help our customers maintain some of revenue, they're going to continue to buy our equipment, and we're going to be okay. It ended up changing into a completely different business unit for them, which is extraordinary. But so that is a great example of what leaders have to do. And that information is coming from outside the company, not from, their senior leader brains. And because they were already had, agile practices in the company, they were able to make that change very quickly. And they allowed competitors to upload their own patterns as well. So they created sort of this community for people to do this. It was really quite extraordinary. And it's a great story, I think, and an example of what, and this is a mid-market company, by the way.
Yeah. We can't be on the technology podcast and not talk about AI, or a business podcast and not talk about AI. That's just that's a sin. So what's from your, like, the new advancements of the AI, which is kind of extraordinary. I used to go around and say, "Oh, we have like, if you don't sort yourself out in the next 5 years to 10 years, you're gonna be extinct." But with the current advancement and the exponential possibilities that are very close now, they feel very close. What do you think is gonna happen to these organizations that are still struggling with that kind of culture and that kind of not being able to respond to the change and uncertainty?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you have to separate the wheat from the chaff. So, what is the hype? I mean, people are using the term AI in a way that they were using algorithms a couple of years ago. So, I think that there is some really neat AI, and there's a lot of things that people are claiming are AI
Mm.
that are not AI. And so, I think in a mature company where the core business understands how they're going to innovate their products or their markets over the next, say, 3 or 4 years. And you have a mature center of excellence where the innovation people have figured out a way to support them with the tools, the templates, the teaching, the coaching, outside vendors, if that works. I mean, there's a zillion ways of doing it. That's what really I think innovation labs should be focused on for the next 5 years. If they also have time to play around with technology, I think that's great. But it's not building new businesses. It's really trying to figure out what is blockchain or what is AI. How are those things going to solve the needs that our company currently addresses? So not going after different. This is like why I try not to think about product portfolios. I try to think about needs portfolio, because it's the needs that who needs the needs actually don't change very much. It's the people that need the needs, and the technology that we use to address the needs. So
Yeah.
you're talking about early on, you mentioned the new generations stuff, right? So you have a
Mm.
generation of customers that are using your products now, and in 5 years, 10 years, there's either more of them, or there's a graduation and suddenly they're gone and a
Mhm.
new wave comes in. Well, so what are the demands and the needs of the new wave? How are they different? And the older ones that move on, is that a market opportunity? Can you go follow them with something and offer them something else? So it's a needs portfolio. And then you're doing technology and startup scouting to understand what are the new technologies, and even the startups that are already playing with it. How are they using that new technology that benefits the needs that we're currently serving? And yeah, you can run experiments and try to figure it out,
Mhm.
but it's really often the core business that is worried about this stuff. I mean, we used to like have insurance companies that are like, we need peer-to-peer insurance because lemonade was the all the topic. And we run these workshops. What's your problem? Oh, well, customers need blah, blah, blah. What's the solution? Peer to peer insurance. And I was like, no, 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 you're not addressing anything. It's like, I mean, it was crazy to try to get their mind out of it. And so people are doing that with AI now, and it's
Yeah.
wrong focus. Don't focus on the AI. Focus first on the needs. Who's going to have the needs? How are the needs going to evolve? And can AI make it better?
100%, I agree with you. It has to, any type of technology, not just AI, any type of technology, if it's not value driven, if it's not solving a problem, why on earth? And that's the danger of technologies. We love technology, and a big critique I always have to our own industries, that why are we not talking about the value? Why are we talking about the technology? Why do we start the conversation with technology itself? It
You're
doesn't. It
exactly
it
right.
just is not the right thing to do. And I get a lot of, when I talk to our customers or our prospects, the very consistent feedback I get is that, oh, we've never seen a software company or a technologist who is interested in the business objectives. I start with what is it that you want to try to achieve, and then we talk about what technology you use and what you should be using and what how to get there. That's, I 100% agree with you. But the pace, like as a technologist myself, the pace at which technology is advancing, getting faster and faster, it's like we don't even get to try something before something new has come along, and that made me think like Geeks is a boutique agency at the moment. So we are small, we are lean, we can experiment with the technology and advise our clients what they should use and what, no, hold on, this is doesn't really add any value at the moment. Let's wait 6 months and see if it's even there after 6 months or not. But I'm wondering how the bigger organizations, how the corporates even get to, how many meetings do they have to even decide, do we even want to sign up to chat gpt to see what it can do and what problem it might solve? Is it a problem
I
or?
don't think it's a problem. And so I think that, again, there's a couple examples in the book of uh, Cargill just waiting out the alternative protein market because they own distribution. So do they have to invent any of this stuff? Do they actually have to figure out what the market is? No, they can watch it. And then they can go in and say, let's partner, or we can acquire. And I'm not sure why that is like some sort of worse way about going about it than having somebody inside the company try to figure all that out. Again, I'm going to go back to the fact that there's thousands of startups that are figuring it out. And so that even if the technology is changing quickly, they're not driving anybody out of business quickly. They're still at the very grassroots level of that. So
That I tend to disagree with you. I
I
think
know,
that
but what's
might
the
that might
example?
where we are, it might
Right.
it might because
But what's the example? Like, what's the history of one of those companies actually coming up and destroying a Cargill? I mean, there's no history of it. And the same thing goes with 3M. So 3M was inventing these material that just like super thin solar material. And one of their startup techie gurus, women, was just at a trade show and found a Stanford startup that was applying a similar item to companies that had really large refrigeration units inside their companies. And she thought that was really cool and said, hey, listen, we might have a technology that's even better. And so they partnered up and they actually got some money from the Department of Engineering to go and develop a solution for it. But they could just wait. They didn't have to compete at the same level as a startup. So I just, where are the disruptive startups? When's the last time a disruptive startup actually took over something? When's the last time?
You're right in a sense of the economy of the enterprise is very different from the economy of the mid market and the SME. Certainly, like the fact that Microsoft just waits until OpenAI is successful and the model proves, then they just up their investment and there you go. They integrate teams and everything. It's a different type of economy. That's not the question there. But I completely think and believe there might not be enough examples yet, but I am seeing the snippets of it. So think about how, so I heard, like giving you the recent example, I heard last week that one of the London universities, and I won't name them, but one of the London universities have a big problem because all of a sudden hundreds of their students who were doing really badly in their assessments, they're all getting A+, and they're all using ChatGPT to do their assessment, but they can't prove it. They don't have, because they're so big and slow and the internal people don't understand what the technology is, what has happened, what do we do with it. They're behind, so people are, and if they don't move fast, people are going to get graduated without
That's
without
an interesting example, but that's where a technology is actually causing a problem. So, I mean, I guess
or is it, I think it's because the larger organizations are so slow. They should be able to um respond faster to
oh, I
change the
I agree
way
with that.
they do the assessment. Like,
I
okay,
agree with that.
ChatGPT has come up, let's change the way we do exams.
Right. I think academics tend to be the slowest on the planet, which is crazy if you think. I think they're even slower than government. So that's kind of crazy. But yeah, but I mean, in that particular example, somebody could just make a decision that we're not doing that anymore. We've suspended that. Now you have to come in and do it orally. And if there's just a gazillion ways of solving that.
I would even say let them use it, but treat it as like an open book. assessment and just design the questions in a different way, that it doesn't matter, and encourage them to use the chat, because that's their tomorrow. Like, that's their, they need to learn how to interact with these
Yeah,
technologies.
it just may be a fad.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I think that mid-market organizations, even themselves, are trying to solve bigger problems than that. And so to me, that's like we went to digital instead of analog because we thought it was faster and neater. And maybe you just make it analog.
Or a hybrid, or completely change the way we look at the world.
Yeah, I mean, the way academics is being run anyway is all slow and old, and there's a lot of things that they could change if they really want to make a change. If they want to just tinker around with how people are submitting their papers, most people say that you can easily detect it if it's generated by ChatGPT.
Well, until it becomes an AI against AI, you use another AI to make it in a way that the other AI can't. I think these are really interesting conversations, and these are the uncharted territory of where we are entering. Absolutely enjoyed our chat, and I think there is so much. I genuinely believe there is so much to learn from larger organizations and the way they are succeeding and the way they are failing. And I think your insight has been really, really useful. Is there any parting words you want to give our audience about how to go about, and if they have an innovation lab, turn it into a center of excellence? If they don't, how they can create the culture of center of excellence?
Yeah, so I just did I did an event yesterday on the rise of product management, and so I think that taking the function of product management seriously will actually solve a lot of the problems. So you can go take a listen to that, and the one on innovation labs becoming COEs. Basically, like I said in the beginning, a lot of these methods that we teach that we're looking at. We're looking at wherever there's uncertainty, and certainly all of the smaller and mid-market companies have uncertainty, and yet they're typically trained to look like big companies. And so we've discussed all of the problems there. So the smaller companies, it's easier to transition, and they've got a lot of data. They've got a lot of. I mean, I think companies are grappling right now with AI that's managing a lot of their data and the Internet of Things, because a lot of their devices are becoming on the internet for their business customers. So there's a lot of work to be done there that's maybe beneficial to your companies, or that they also should be thinking of inside of their own companies. And it's really just separating out what do we know from what do we don't know, and using the lean innovation methods to tackle the unknown and build that into the company, so that the company is always doing exploration mode. It never falls into the trap of like, oh, we've got it all figured out, now we can just execute it. It continues to change. And so people can reach out to me, Brant at brantcooper.com. I answer all emails. I'm Brant Cooper on all social media, so can connect with me there. And watch out for the blog posts and the LinkedIn audio events I'm doing once a month. So yeah, come and check it out.
Thank you so much, Brant. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you to you too. It was a fun conversation. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us in the Innovation Room.
We hope it sparks some ideas.
Want to learn more about what we do?
Maybe you could even be our next guest.
And spark some ideas yourself.
Find us at Geeks Limited.
And join us again soon.
Because real change never stops.